Good morning. In the morning, we are live. It's Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com with a Sunday morning satsang. This is the second one, and we're going to do the mailbag satsang because I had a lot of really interesting messages over the week, and I thought it'd be cool to dive in and look at some because people ask really super interesting questions. And leave very, very interesting comments and suggest interesting books. So we got one from Benjamin, who, in response to the recent podcast about the 3 ways to cure the cancer of instant gratification. If you're hopping on the call, by the way, let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And it's the Sunday morning satsang, going into the mailbag today to read some emails and some comments, and I wanted to start it with something from Benjamin about last week's podcast on the 3 ways to cure the cancer of instant gratification. He says, very helpful post, reminds me of something I read in The Practicing Mind by Thomas M. Sterner. I pronounced that the German way, Sterner. Has anybody read The Practicing Mind by Thomas M. Sterner? Let me know, by the way, where you are in the world and if you're able to hear me properly, and how you're doing, how you're feeling, what time it is, where you're at. Hit those thumbs up so that I know you're engaged and enjoying what's going on here. Anyway, he talks, Benjamin, here about how the practicing mind is about the importance of loving the process itself. And I think that loving the process is exactly what we all need to learn, because no matter what we do in life, we are engaged in a process. Always. It's always a process. So he talks about The Practicing Mind as being a book that's great for helping you learn to enjoy the process for its own sake. And he says, as I've grown more comfortable with and reliant upon the magnetic memory method, this has certainly been my experience. Memorization of a poem, a study guide, or a manual has become a secondary benefit instead of a driving goal. And I think this is really wonderful that Benjamin has come across this. And he continues, while driving or waiting for a phone call or sitting in the doctor's office or engaged in a boring meeting, I'll lose myself in jumping through my palaces or come up with fun images for people's names. I could go on and on. Since you introduced me to multi-dimensional palaces, my capacity seems endless. Isn't that great? I think that's really great. So he sums up, loving the process has, for me, defeated that stressful pressure for instant gratification. In fact, I had forgotten how much of a burden it had been in the past until I read your post. That used to be me, I thought. So thank you, Benjamin, for that email. I really appreciate it. 3 ways to cure the cancer of instant gratification is the post on magneticmemorymethod.com. And you can listen to the podcast version, and that's at magneticmemorymethod.com/instant-gratification. So let's go into the mailbox here even further. You know, if you're here and you haven't said hello yet, let me know where you are in the world. Thank you very much for being here, and let's keep this rolling. So Phil writes on a recent live that we did, I'm most grateful to Anthony and Jenny, that was the one with Jenny Gorman, for the issues raised in this video. Having recently suffered several seizures, the cause as yet undetermined, and to some degree loss of memory, I'm truly grateful for other avenues to explore apart from the usual head injuries, aging process, etc. We often just look for the general issues and tend not to look outside the square. Given my age, I can relate to a lot of the possible causes of the buildup of heavy metals in the body, as raised by Jenny, and for that I am eternally grateful. I can look back on my life and see a multitude of products which could possibly contribute to such an issue, and I can also look at the products of today that could possibly contribute to such issues in future generations. Much appreciated. Well, that was a great message, Phil. Thank you for leaving that here on the YouTube channel. I appreciate it very much. And you know, if you all have any questions on this live, please let me know so that we can start answering them. And let me know if you actually like this free-form Sunday satsang style. Last week, people really loved it. A lot of people showed up, and the questions were phenomenal. But so far, no one has said hello from where you are in the world. So keep the engagement rolling if you are having fun, and let's keep rolling here with the next message that I wanted to cover here. J.A. says, Anthony, I thoroughly enjoy these shows, and he says, what I find useful is the rhizomatic learning and teaching in which you engage. I'm currently reading Henri Bergson, and I love the fact that you relate philosophers to memory and education. Well, I think it's one of the most important things that we can do is to always keep the memory training tradition connected with its origins, and it is deeply connected to the origins of philosophy. And philosophy is a really super important thing to keep learning about, keep studying, because philosophy, as I was once taught by my Hebrew tutor actually, he said he had a really great idea of what philosophy is. He said philosophy is like, well, the world is like a city, and philosophy gives you a map for how to navigate that city. And I thought that was a really nice way of thinking about it, and it's just super powerful for thinking about why you would want to read philosophy. Well, where do you want to go in the world, and how do you want to get there? How pleasurable, how powerful, how amazing, how ethical, how well-centered do you want that journey to be? Well, there are people who have thought deep and long and hard about this, and they've written some of it down, and they've made a lot of mistakes along the way. They've made a lot of assumptions that were not correct, but they also created a bunch of knowledge, and some of that knowledge can be placed into your memory. And when you have that in memory, then you have richer and deeper experiences of thought, so you can continue thinking. And that is quite an amazing thing. So back into the mailbox here. There is one question that I think is pretty important if you're learning a language. Who on the call is learning a language? If you are learning a language, let me know, and let me know which language it is. I'm not sure which language the person here is learning, but his name's Sang-Jun, and he writes, Anthony, your method definitely can be effective, assuming though a language has 26 alphabet letters. I can certainly think of 26 memory palaces. Then I can come up with probably at least about 20 stations for each memory palace, but that holds only 26 by 20, which equals 520 words. But what if my aim is to eventually learn 5,200 words in the language? That would require on average 200 stations in each memory palace, but I really don't think that can be created or maintained. You have suggested making several different memory palaces for each letter, but even if I could do that, is it really feasible to attempt to keep 5,200 sets of info? This is a deep misunderstanding of what all memory techniques for language learning can do for you. So the first thing is just to get started with one memory palace and demonstrate to yourself that you can memorize 10 words. Once you've done that, you will have no reason to doubt the mathematical calculations that you can make. But a lot of people, they let the numbers, the outcome, guide the decisions, which is fair enough. You do want to make certain calculations and think about your memory palaces strategically and create them strategically. But a lot of people, they will see that as too much upfront work. So rig the game in your favor by just getting started with one memory palace, 10 words, and really feel how that it works. And then from there, you might do something like Eldon Clem and memorize 1,000 words in just 6 weeks, which is very, very fast. And then you just reduplicate the process after that. But if you're not going to just dive in, then yeah, all the pre-calculations can seem like a lot, but it really, really is. It's more than feasible. It's more than feasible. But what you want to be doing though is you want to be practicing the practice of memory so that you can actually use those memory palaces to memorize more words. So when you make a first pass, you've got your 10 words, then you go and add phrases to those original words. And then of course those phrases have other words that are either already in the row of 10 words or new words. So you're compounding, and this is the principle of compounding and it's just really, really powerful for accumulating more words. So it's never really just about vocabulary. Vocabulary is how you build from the ground up, but you definitely need to get to the actual level of phrases. And then of course you have the big five of language learning. So you have memory, which is going to serve everything, and then you have reading, writing, speaking, listening, and writing, speaking, listening, and then memory. So all of these things serve a great perfect circle. As long as you keep feeding all of them from each and every element, then you're going to be golden. So you want to develop the ability to memorize phrases after you develop the ability to memorize words, although you can do it the other way around as well. But I find that most people, and I've dealt with thousands and thousands of people, the cognitive overwhelm of memorizing entire phrases really is a stretch for them. So you want to start with just one word, and you start with one memory palace, one station, then you go to the next, and you go to the next. And if you know that that memory palace just has 10 stations in it, then you know it's not a hugely overwhelming thing. You break it down, and then you use the correct configuration to get those words into long-term memory, because a lot of people think, how am I going to maintain this forever and ever and ever? That's not the point of the memory palace. That's not the point of any of this sort of exercise that we're working on. The point is to get it into long-term memory as quickly as possible using the memory palace as a tool. That's the point. So I hope that that's understood. Let me know if you have any questions around that, and let's see what else we've got in the mailbox. I think that we've got time here for maybe one more. So Viswanatha says, my progress is slow because post-duty hours I am unable to experience the flow of learning. And he asks, is it a good idea to imagine myself acting in the memory palace instead of someone else acting? Will this have a positive impact or a negative impact on memory? Well, this is where you want to do some practice on your own and figure out what kind of style works for you. So there's actually multiple ways to use a memory palace that we go into in the masterclass. There's at least 3 that people tend to find a preference for, and one of them is to see themselves moving through the memory palace. I don't find this a great way for developing speed, because it creates so much cognitive overwhelm. But what you can do is explore it and see if it works for you, because it might not create much cognitive overwhelm. It might actually create less, and what you're able to do is find that, hey, this really works for me, so I'm going to go with this and explore it deeper. If not, then try a different approach to creating and using your memory palaces. But every time that you have to see something in there, or you have to create an experience that will involve some sort of synesthesia at the end of the day, where you're mixing together not just visuality but feelings and sounds, and you know, your representation of sounds and concepts and so forth, all of this needs to be broken down and pared down and scaled back to its the least most amount of cognitive drain, so that your focus can be on actually creating the information, or creating the magnetic imagery that is going to allow you to get that imagery into long-term memory using the process that we are talking about here. So that's a really important point. Another little thing here in the inbox, Jose says, thank you very much for sharing all the material. I think it's great. I'm using it right now and it is working. Well, congratulations, Jose. He says, I'm trying to use the method learning new vocabulary, but I think I need some advice using a memory palace for each letter of the alphabet. I'm trying to learn new words from a frequency dictionary. Is this a good idea? So creating memory palaces for each letter is kind of difficult since I'm jumping from one place to another. Can you tell me your thoughts about it? Oh, so it's Jose Eduardo. Thank you for your email, and it's really great that you're taking action and that you're getting results. So the first thing to do is to spend a bit of time thinking about what it is exactly you're doing that's getting you results. because a lot of people, they won't do any sort of analysis, and the analysis is how that you figure out what's working really well for you, and then you can figure out how to focus on that and increase it and make it grow. And by the way, if you're just hopping on now, let me know where in the world that you're from, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and what questions you have, and what you're doing with your memory, how you feel about your memory, and what's going on with it. So we can, this is all about having a dialogue if you would like one. So the first thing is that a frequency dictionary is very, very useful in some cases. It just sort of depends on what your goals is. So we started out with someone who wants to memorize thousands and thousands of words, whereas a frequency dictionary might give you between 500 and 850 words as being the most frequently used words, and if you focus on those, then the idea is that you'll be more fluent. And the catch there is that yes and no, because the frequency doesn't necessarily reflect your context, your situation. So you have your own frequency. And one of the better ways to understand your own frequency is to build your own frequency dictionary based on an understanding of what it is that you want to speak and how you want to speak it. And so one of the things that you can do is just pay very, very close attention to what it is that you have wanted to say in specific language learning settings, and then make a note of it and learn how that you would say those in the language that you are learning, so that you can know how to say those things. And this happens all the time for me, and it's how that I essentially build my own frequency dictionary, and then ask for help with the people that I speak Chinese right now with, to basically say, well, you know, what should I be saying properly in this context, and be very keenly attuned to the fact that they're going to come from a particular city or a region. They're going to have inflections and accents and all kinds of really interesting features of what their approach to the language is. So frequency dictionary is a good solution. It is worth exploring, but it's not necessarily the solution. If you're just hopping on, let me know where in the world you are, and what you're doing, what you're thinking. And if you've used a frequency dictionary, I'd be very interested in that. I prefer to not use frequency dictionaries very much, or if I use a frequency dictionary, I just use an English frequency dictionary and then figure out what those words are in the language that I'm learning. So Ogden has a cool frequency dictionary that is really just around 850 words. You can make fewer words from it or more depending on your preferences, but really a frequency dictionary is sort of not the angle I would go. I would go for, if you can find one, a monolingual dictionary, and that is great because it breaks down in the simplest possible way what that language is saying in its own language. So you can get it, you know, they can be difficult to find, but they're well worth searching out. So let me know if you have any questions about that. Going deeper into the email here, and DJ says, agonizing trying to learn and memorize Freemason ritual, particularly pages long lectures. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with verbatim, and one of the reasons why is because they feel like they need to create an image for each and every word. And what you want to do is figure out a way to not feel focused on each and every word, but rather, I want to see what this button does. You want to find a way to figure out how to not concentrate on every word, but still remember all the words accurately. I wonder what's going on here. I haven't seen any comments from anybody, and that is just kind of strange. Have I somehow turned comments off? Let me know if you have a comment window there, because it's kind of weird. It's radio silence, crickets out there. Maybe if I put some bubbles on, or dance party. Does the effects change? Woo, dream. Yeah, well, I do see some thumbs up coming. That's great, but so far nobody has said anything. So let me know what you're doing and what you're thinking, and if you would like to continue with this. Back to Freemason rituals and memorizing pages-long lectures. So that's the first thing, is to release the need to remember each and every word of whatever it is that you're memorizing verbatim, because you're really better off focusing on the big words that communicate most of the meaning and letting your intuition bring back the operative words. And that can be a bit tricky, but you know, there's a great video where Ron White is interviewing Ben Pridmore, and if you don't know those names, check them out because they're really interesting guys to learn from about your memory. And Ron White says that the best advice that Ben Pridmore ever gave, and then he says, Ben, you tell what the advice is. And the advice is just to simply trust your memory. So learn the techniques and then use the techniques, but then trust your memory to fill in the blanks. And this is one of the hardest steps for people, is getting to that point of just stepping back and trusting your memory. So it doesn't even come down to long passages or phrases, but it comes down to allowing yourself to practice the practice, figuring out what it is that's working for you, analyzing what's working for you, making sure you really understand what it is that's working for you in the mnemonic practice, and then testing and exploring and going further and kind of letting go of the results, because you can trust that your memory is going to bring it back. And so basically what I would do is start with one sentence, memorize it, and then move on to the next, and memorize the next, and then go on to the next. And as you're going along, think about what's happening. Think about what's happening in the process, and think about what it is that you need to be doing to improve, and getting a better feeling for the big ideas in sentences, how you can shape them, and how you can get away from one-to-one correspondence on everything, but still have accuracy. So it's really interesting to look at the mnemonic examples of other people, and usually what you'll see is that there is no one-to-one correspondence in what they're seeing in their mind. It's actually very, very tangential, it's very fluid, and it's just triggers that act as catalysts that help them get back to that, and they're often very minimal, and you sometimes think, well, how on earth is that triggering back this material for them? That makes no sense to me. And that's the whole danger with mnemonic examples, is that we want them to make sense, but it's like calculus. It's the symbols stand for something else, and why, except for the difference is that mnemonic imagery is not a shared language amongst millions of people the way mathematical symbols are. Mnemonic examples, mnemonic images are ones that are deeply personal and require your creation of them. And so a lot of people get lost in looking for the example, instead of understanding that you create the examples by understanding the tools and the principles, and you get in there. And so if I'm not a Mason, and I don't have access to what these rituals look like and so forth to even try to give an example, but that wouldn't be the point. The point would be to take a long piece of text and start encoding that text using a memory palace. That's the most likely way, and then tracking what's happening and improving based on the results. So if there are any Masons on the call who can share something about their process, I know it's not the most shareable thing, but I'd be more interested in that. But just general speech memorization is just that simple. And you know, there are some people out there, and I've seen some crazy moments in the history of memory training where people have said, don't use memory techniques at all, just go for rote learning for long speeches and plays and so forth. And I think that that's a dangerous piece of advice, because the memory techniques really, really work. But some people do prefer, I mean, there are books that I've read and I've talked about on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast where people have claimed that merely by praying for the skill, they have memorized entire books of religious texts and so forth. And I really find that kind of suspect, because there is encoding. Memory works by encoding. There's no getting around that. It's just a question of how well are you doing the encoding, and when you're using memory techniques, you're actively engaged in the memory techniques. So if you're just hopping on the call, let me know where you are in the world. I think that there's something going on wrong here, because I don't see anybody leaving any notes or asking any questions, which is odd. Usually we are overwhelmed with questions, so there might be a technical error today. But I'll go a little deeper here into my mailbox and hope some of you guys say hello. If not, and you're on the replay, say hello down in the description below, and that would be fantastic. And here's another one from Shamelis. Shamelis says, I'm grateful for you sharing this information. It's fantastic. I finished reading Joshua Foer's book recently. He's referring to Moonwalking with Einstein. And he says, I've got the Memory Palace explanation from you, and it's very clear. And that's available at magneticmemorymethod.com. My aim, Shamela says, is to study one language from my country of origin. I'm thinking of using metro train stations in Melbourne, Australia, since I don't have another big memory palace. I'm struggling to kick off the work. I took a few pictures of train stations in one line. I feel it's not enough to study a language. What's your advice? Is there any special aspect for language study? I will watch the video again for better understanding. Well, yeah, the video series at magneticmemorymethod.com is all about creating memory palaces for the actual full training on language. I highly recommend either one of my books or the video course itself on the process, but you're probably not going to you're going to get an advantage for sure from just using metro train stations in Melbourne. Now, I'm in Brisbane and I've never been to Melbourne, so I don't know what the train stations are like there. Here, there are these little bus stations everywhere, and they're pretty cool. I haven't used any of them yet as memory palaces, but one of the there are always interesting things about using external locations, one of which is the connectability of external locations to other external locations. So when you're using train stations, like I did this in Berlin, where first of all I had to memorize significant parts of the Ringbahn, and that's the first step to using it as a memory palace. And then like the U3 line I memorized at one point, all the stations along there, and it's a great memory exercise, but it's like it's a burden, because not only do you have to memorize the actual order of the stations in order to use them, but then you have to know something about each of the stations to get, you know, a number of memory palaces or stations from each of those individual memory palaces, because each one will be an individual memory palace. But what ultimately I found was a lot more useful was just getting a straight up memorization of the stations in the order that they flow from north to west, or north to south, or east to west, or if they've got a curve like the Ringbahn in Berlin goes in a ring. What I found is just boil those stations down to the simplest possible elements, and that would be 3 stations per station. 3 magnetic stations per magnetic memory palace, and that would be the left side of the platform, the middle, and the right side of the platform. Because unless you're going to put in the time to learn the ins and outs of each individual station, it just becomes a huge burden using those, and you want to be focused on the language you're learning. And that's why I created all the free worksheets at magneticmemorymethod.com, so you can just simply create your memory palaces, create them as quickly as possible, and get down to the actual project. And you know, if you want to make the mathematical calculation, then that would be oh, so Kevin, thank you for emailing me. He says, you're wondering why no one was chatting. It said chat was disabled. Thanks for everything. I'm going to see if I can get that chat enabled, because that's the whole point of this. I wonder how it got unenabled. I wonder if there's a way to change that now, or just start another one, or do it next time, get it fixed for next time. wonder what, well, forgive me guys for a minute here. I want to see if I can figure this out. But is that all making sense? You can email me, which I really, really appreciate Kevin doing that. Kevin Owen, I'm going to remember your name. So how am I going to do that while you're here as I'm farting around here? Well, first of all, when I think of Kevin, I often think of my friend Kevin Sieber. And I knew a guy named Owen, so I'll just put you guys in a fist fight. And what I would like to do there is have you in Owen's swimming pool. So that's a way of getting that started. And you know, I don't have the cues of your face or anything like that, which I would normally have in a name memorization setting, but that's a basic starting point right there. And well, let's see. I'm not sure what is going on here. It doesn't give me any options to make changes. It's really strange. I apologize, guys. I wanted to have here a Sunday satsang with some questions answered, and there just doesn't seem to be a way to make any changes while we're actually on the live here. So instead of getting boring, why don't we say goodbye for now and come back and see if I can make that change. And we'll have 2 today. Sound good? Thank you very much for being here, and I hope that answered some good questions. If for any reason you're not subscribed to this channel and you want to get updates and notifications when we go live, click that subscribe button. Make sure you click the like button. Make sure you leave comments on these videos so that we can continue sharing them and get more knowledge about memory improvement for everybody in the world who wants it. And I really appreciate you helping me share the good news about memory techniques and visiting me at magneticmemorymethod.com to help make it so. So I'm going to see if I can get this fixed and maybe hop on for another short session. Thank you for being on this one, and thank you, Kevin Owen, for letting me know. I really, really appreciate that, and look forward to hearing from you again soon. Take care, and until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic.